Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Fuel the Pedal podcast, the show with that Portuguese nutritionist guy living in Spain and broadcasting in English. I am Gabriel Martins, yes, still pronouncing my name in the Portuguese way. We are at episode number 9, and before getting into number 9, let's talk about number 8, which was a tremendously successful episode, I might say. I've been receiving a lot of positive feedback from you guys, and I truly appreciate your warmth. And again, I'd like to thank a lot to Dr. Stuart Phillips and Dr. Felipe Teixeira for their time and precious insights on BCAAs, glutamine, collagen, and HMB supplementation. Interestingly, people seem to have particularly liked the collagen part. If you haven't heard it already, and if you're new here to the podcast, feel free to check out episode number 8. Before getting into the good stuff, let's just quickly touch base on the latest news in the cycling calendar. Many things happened this past weeks. For those listening who think cycling is just the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia and the Vuelta a España, you have no idea. Let's start with ladies first. The Women's Tour, also known as the OVO Energy Women's Tour that takes place in the UK every year, was won by Great Britain's Lizzie Deignan, who became the first rider to win 2 OVO Energy Women's Tour titles. The track saga for the rider, who only returned to racing in late April following maternity leave, finished 8th in a reduced bunch sprint to peep Kasia Nuvodoma from Canyon SRAM Racing to the overall crown by 2 seconds, the smallest winning margin in race history. Fresh news from the Criterium de Dauphiné. Jacob Fuglsang from Team Astana won his second Dauphiné after in 2017. Meanwhile, TJ van Garderen from Team EF Education First and Emmanuel Boekman from Bora Hansgrohe rounded up the final podium. The last stage of the 71st Criterium de Dauphiné went to Dylan van Baarle from Team Ineos throughout a breakaway from far out. The Dutchman beat Australia's Jack Haig from Mitchelton Scott, whose teammate and former race leader Adam Yates pulled out as many riders got sick the day after they faced very difficult stormy conditions. This year's edition of the Criterium de Dauphiné was also marked by a very unfortunate episode. Chris Froome sustained multiple serious injuries during a recon of stage 4 of the Criterium de Dauphiné. The 34-year-old rider crashed towards the end of his route recon, sustaining injuries including a fractured right femur, a fractured elbow, and fractured ribs. Froome has subsequently been ruled out of the rest of the race, and he will also miss this year's edition of the Tour de France. Chris Froome has thanked Team Ineos' fans and the wider cycling family for their overwhelming support. I'd like to personally extend my wishes of a fast recovery to Chris Froome in this long journey that lies ahead of him. In other news, Remco Evenepoel is the winner of this year's Tour of Belgium. Despite suffering a fall in the mass sprint on the last stage, the 19-year-old De Koning Quick-Step rider from Flemish Brabant escaped serious injury, crossing the finish line in Beringen in Limburg province with a victorious smile on his face. And to finish the news, the Tour of Switzerland has just started, and for the moment, Casper Asgreen from De Koning Quick-Step is on the lead, but there is still plenty of race to go until the 23rd of June, and then begins the countdown for the Tour de France, expected to start on July the 6th in Brussels, Belgium. Moving on into today's episode, and I know I always say that today's episode is a special one, but they all are in a very special way to me, and this one is of no exception. Today we are getting away from the cycling and sports context to get into a more health-related subject. And today we are tackling a topic that is quite emotional to me. Today we are talking about chemophobia, the irrational fear of chemicals in food, of ultra-processed food, and many other food additives that people are too much worried about in an era where food has never been safer. These behaviors may be part of an unofficial eating disorder that is growing silently, orthorexia, or the obsession with eating healthy and clean eating that is also affecting nutrition professionals as well, contributing to spread even more the irrational fear of processed foods and an exaggeration of food quality rather than quantity. But if you're a usual listener, you will ask, but what does this have to do with cycling? everything, not only in cycling but in the sports context in general, we are passing away the information that eating optimally for sports performance is also about eating organic, clean, and the reality of sports may be actually more than the concept of pure food. It's about context, it's about convenience, it's about culture and providing foods that may not be as healthy in some contexts but are available and convenient. To talk about this topic, I've brought someone special. James Kennedy is a chemistry teacher who is committed to fight chemophobia and explain chemistry in a fun way so people can understand why we overreact to harmless, negligible sources of contamination and buy organic, natural, and chemical-free alternative products at elevated prices because we are psychologically predisposed to think they're safer. The concept of those is essential to understand, but labeling something as black or white, radicalizing concepts, is what sells books, not the other way around. James has also a really cool YouTube channel called Sincerely Chemicals. I'll put a short sample of one of its videos right here.
A lot of people seem to believe that they should avoid contact with chemicals, but this is actually very strange because everything on Earth consists of chemicals.
Many of which have very long names that are difficult to pronounce, like 4-hydroxy-3-methoxyphenol-methyl 8-methyl non-6-xenamide. That's the active ingredient in chilies, by the way. Everything contains traces of chemicals that would be harmful if we ingested them in large amounts. There's a myth that nature takes care of humans and provides them with an environment in which they can thrive. This myth is often referred to as the naturalness fallacy, because in fact, humans have always created artificial environments such as farms and houses to create a comfortable existence despite nature, not because of it. No personal care product in existence is truly natural though, because it's not come from nature. Even plant-based skincare products are not entirely natural because that particular blend of ingredients has never occurred in nature before. Natural is only an appropriate label for single ingredients from animals, plants, or minerals that have undergone minimal processing.
It is true that nature gives us some amazing gifts, such as natural foods, antibiotics, and fragrances. However, nature's gifts need to be located, retrieved, extracted, purified, and processed before they are useful and safe for human consumption.
Consider this a teaser for what is up next. The video continues and I recommend you to check it out. But James's work goes beyond this. You probably came across some images on the internet of a banana, for example, and the list of ingredients of the all-natural banana below, with all the chemicals that are naturally inside a banana. That will surprise you. That's James's creation, and it's part of a series of infographics he creates and are available on his website. James Kennedy is a British chemistry teacher and passionate chemistry spokesperson. He founded the chemistry outreach initiative Sincerely Chemicals in 2017 and published the book Fighting Chemophobia in 2018. Since graduating from the University of Cambridge with a master's degree in natural sciences in 2010, he has pursued a passion for science communication and science outreach by using festivals, lectures, seminars, conferences, posters, and t-shirts to make chemistry more open and accessible to the public. He is a vocal pro-chemistry advocate who writes articles online and speaks in radio and podcast interviews. James's first published book, Fighting Chemophobia, stemmed from a need for people to understand and cure chemophobia by seeing chemicals in a more rational light. He has been teaching for over 8 years and researching chemophobia for 3 years. He lives with his wife and daughter in Melbourne, Australia. I suspect this episode will be longer than usual and you will see me more excited than in previous episodes because this topic is just incredible and I truly love talking about this. I believe people need this kind of messages to clean their minds of the garbage we've been reading on social media and develop the capacity to be skeptical and be able to filter information much better. So, what is chemophobia? Should we fear ultra-processed foods as some nutrition fanatics propose? Are food additives bad for us? Is dosage important? Are there advantages in consuming organic produce and GMO? What to say about them? Up next on Fuel the Pedal podcast. Hi James, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. How are you doing?
Wonderful, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on.
It's so good, James. It's so good to have you here. We've been talking offline about this. It gets really frustrating when trying to tackle this topic and reason with people about this. And when I found James, it was just a breath of fresh air. And now I have to bring James here on the show. So, James, for people who don't know you, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm James Kennedy, and I'm the author of Fighting Chemophobia, it's a book about how to survive the marketing ploys that companies use to create the fear of synthetic chemicals around us. And they often then attach their own so-called natural alternative products to that. So they're using the fear of chemicals and the fear of chemistry to sell their own product. And it's a growing phenomenon, especially here in Australia where I live, that organic and natural and chemical-free products are growing at 15, 20, 25% per year in different sectors, especially in the baby sector. It's growing faster than any other. Organic baby products are booming. And not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but some of the marketing tactics they use create fear and anxiety in people. And the result, the backlash, is that people end up hating science. Now, I'm a science teacher full time. I teach chemistry to kids. That's my full time job. This chemophobia stuff I do, during the holidays as a side gig, I suppose. But it's a passion of mine because the perception people have of chemicals and of chemistry reflects on me as a chemistry teacher. I don't want to be seen to be teaching something, that's hated to my kids. I don't want to be seen to be Walter White. I don't want to be one of those stereotypes of a chemistry teacher who, represents an industry that makes drugs and cancer-causing compounds and adds things to products to make them cheaper. And it's important for me to improve the image of chemistry teachers.
Yeah, sure. And regarding food and nutrition, this has been happening as well. So I believe this is sort of a transversal phenomenon happening out there. So listeners might be asking, this is a cycling podcast. What does this has to do with cycling? And today we are on to something completely different. And if you are new here on the podcast, this is in fact a cycling podcast where we talk about nutrition, about metabolism and physiology of cycling. So what does this fear of chemicals, the obsession with healthy eating, the so-called orthorexia, has to do with cycling? Well, it has to do with cycling the same way it has to do with many other sports and the fitness world. We are passing on the image that athletes should be eating only real food, whatever that means, with an excessive focus on food quality rather than quantity, scrutinizing food, ensuring that always comes from the healthiest sources with labels like no hormones, like organic, like you just mentioned, no glyphosate, gluten-free, dairy-free, unrefined, non-processed, no artificial flavorings, preservatives, additives, or carcinogenic packaging. And at first glance, such concern for consuming, healthiest foods possible seems like a respectable display of health consciousness. But I feel that for some, eating healthy can become an obsession, resulting in endless list of food concerns such as environmental impact, local food sourcing, animal rights, combining time of meals, excessive researching, cataloging, weighting, measuring foods, and excessive, meal planning as well. And don't get me wrong, some of these behaviors is what we nutritionists in the sports and clinical setting, we try to encourage. But the reality is that people have become obsessed with this to the point that they no longer can make exceptions, ever. And one day that they eat something out of this routine, they feel bad and guilty about this. This is, in my view, an eating disorder, what we refer to as orthorexia. And you're not supposed to overthink food. And it is so difficult to reason with people and even with nutrition colleagues who unfortunately have acquired this mentality as well. So I brought some help. I brought the cavalry. James is the cavalry of common sense. I hope, and I'm sure he will be able to shed some light here and give us true lessons in basic chemistry and biology and put things in perspective for us. So, we have been everywhere in the past decade. Some will say that nutrition has been exciting and it's in its most exciting form ever. I would say it's in the most obsessive form ever. It has been crazy, and social media has undoubtedly contributed a lot to this. Everyone is a warrior, a keyboard warrior, and a self-proclaimed scientist, graduated on Google and Facebook. And we have come from low carb, from paleo to keto. Well, I will say from extreme low carb to extreme paleo to extreme keto, because there's no middle term here, to extreme clean eating, to extreme fear of processed food and everything chemical. Now, culminating now with natural only, preservative free, colorant free, and big pharma as a conspiracy to kill us all, and we all work for them, of course. So, James, why do people chronically strive for the radical solutions, particularly demonizing food patterns and unfounded fear of chemicals? Is there an innate reason in human nature for this to happen? Do you think this pattern may be increasing?
Is it first of all, why do we look at foods as good and bad rather than in terms of how much we're taking in? Now, that's actually the innate way to look at all substances, just the presence or absence of the substance. And actually, knowledge of dosage is something that you learn through scientific training. Through looking into what causes chemophobia, I found that people who've studied dosage, particularly a unit or a course that includes dosage, molar concentrations, things like that, are almost immune to becoming chemophobic, because they understand the importance of quantity, where you can have, a million molecules of something. Sounds like a lot, but it's actually such a tiny quantity, it'll have no effect on the body whatsoever. They understand that when something very toxic is in such a tiny amount, it'll actually have no effect. They understand as well that if you've got something which is, supposedly an elixir that does great things, if it's in your product and you're paying a premium for such a tiny amount of it, it's doing nothing for you. So this knowledge of dosage is something you learn in any sort of scientific course, in any scientific training. The innate way to look at risks is just black and white, to categorize things as these are always good, these are always bad. And that's because we're not using our head, we're using our gut instinct. And there's a lot of research into this. The way that we have evolved to assess the risks in our environment are actually based on 7 factors, seven check boxes, if you like. It seems to be that anything that ticks these 7 check boxes will cause us to have an inflated sense of how dangerous that risk is. So, the check boxes are, very briefly, any risk that is genuinely tiny, we're going to overfear. Any risk that is affecting some proportion of the population disproportionately more, like any we call it unfairly distributed. If it's affecting some people more than others, we fear it more. If the risk is new to us, we fear it more. If it's man-made, we fear it more. If it has consequences which are delayed in the future and sort of uncertain to us, then we fear it more. If it's imposed by other people, particularly people we don't like or trust, and that could be corporations or governments, depending on your political, economic view, we fear it more. And if it has no visible positive side benefit, we fear it more. So this is all outlined, in great detail in my book. The research shows that these are the 7 factors. And it turns out that artificial chemicals, preservatives, the colorants, the things that they put into food, actually tick all 7 boxes. So not only is it the natural way to assess risk is black and white, irrespective of quantity. And also synthetic chemicals and food additives happen to tick all 7 boxes. They are, in effect, they're among the most over-feared substances on the planet. Now, interestingly, the most under-feared phenomenon, the most under-feared risk I could find was heart attacks, cardiovascular disease. It was fascinating to see that it only ticked 2 of the fear boxes out of 7. And given that cardiovascular diseases are among the biggest killers in the world, it's believable, I think. It makes sense when you see so many people still eating the wrong kind of diet, still not getting enough exercise. They're nowhere near as fearful as they should be of poor cardiovascular health. Whereas synthetic chemicals, there's uproar about that. As far as I'm aware, synthetic food additives have never actually killed anyone. So it is the innate gut instinct way to look at risks, and it's incredibly faulty. Just like many of our other gut instincts, racism, fear of the unknown, they're all irrational, and we have to overcome them. We have to overcome them by learning science. And in the case of chemophobia and the fear of synthetic chemicals, the antidote is studying dosage. It's as simple as that.
Completely, James. I couldn't agree more. And, nutrition is so sensual, so sexy, so appealing on the internet. And sometimes I wished my profession was more boring and nobody cared about it. So we could be doing
everybody
our
eats,
job.
right?
Yeah, everybody eats. So, and everyone has a platform and everyone has an opinion. So I think, therefore, I'm right. So I wished it was really more boring so we could be doing our job quietly and more focused on what really matters. And we have to be debunking all these myths over and over again. It became a part of our job as being a nutritionist. It's just depressing how human nature can create ideas out of thin air. People actually believing them. There's no filter anymore. And it got so much deep rooted into people's minds. And it's just insane how these things sell in the nutrition world, but not as much in other areas. For example, we've been since forever hearing that campaigns for shampoo, that they nourish your hair through B vitamin complexes and macadamia oils and whatever. I believe we're all a bit skeptical about this. Shampoo, okay, it's just shampoo. Nobody cares. Men would normally care less than women, but that's not the point. The point is that we buy it because we like, you like the brand, we like the packaging, and mainly we like the smell of the shampoo, especially
which is synthetic, yes.
Yeah, which is synthetic. So in nutrition, we say something new, especially things that make sense or provide a convenient explanation for something that they can't achieve, such as lose weight, have a better health, improve exercise performance in the case of the sports setting, or just can cure cancer. The idea of selling that nutrition can cure cancer is insane, and people believe it like that.
It's dangerous, and the fact that everybody is interested is more of a reason to be more cautious. There have been studies to show that nutrition can assist with, especially with the symptoms, or can alter the progression slightly of cancers. But the danger comes when people give up the advice from their doctor. That's the trigger point for me. You can follow these diets. If you want to tweak your metabolism somehow, yes, you can follow some specialist diet. That's fine. But the line is crossed for me when the person giving the advice says, your health professional is trying to trick you. Don't listen to your health professional. Take my medicine instead. Take my diet instead. Take my expensive herbal tincture instead. The moment they say, don't trust your doctor's lying to you, big pharma, they're trying to make money out of you, they want to keep you sick, all of that conspiracy nonsense, actually, it costs lives. And for me, that's where the line is crossed. As soon as they say don't trust, that's like a litmus test for me. If they say, doctors don't want you to know, blah, 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 or, banned by big pharma, or
Totally.
Anything that asks you to be skeptical of your healthcare professional is garbage and dangerous.
When we are in the nutrition degree, of course, we learn that there are diets specific for cancer patients. Of course, there are some guidelines that we can focus. But the problem is that people exaggerate them when they are told that don't do chemotherapy, skip all that, because that ruins that, and they go to this alternative health professionals that say the things that they want to hear, that they're all wrong. You shouldn't do that. You should be taking baking soda because baking soda makes your body alkaline and you will cure cancer. This is a big one. We could be going forever here, James. It's just.
That's the extreme case, where and these cases have existed, by the way. Part of the motivation that got me to write the book was there was a health blogger in Melbourne who was becoming huge. She'd made millions from her anti-cancer diet. This is Belle Gibson, and she's local here, Melbourne, Australia. She signed a deal with Apple to launch her cookbook and her app on the iPad. I think it was the iPad 2 that was launching at the time. And Apple decorated their stores with banners of her app on the thing, and they were going to preload the iPad with her app on it. It was a huge deal. Now, before the iPad actually went out for sale, she was exposed as a fraud. Not only did she never have cancer, but she lied about her age, her upbringing. She lied about the operations she'd had, the types of cancer she had. She lied about everything. She even fundraised for charities over $1 million and kept the money. So she was obviously going in and out of court for the next few years, and she's been fined now, finally. But she was part of a local group of fitness bloggers who thought that they could cure cancer with their diet, basically. But it turned out that there was one of her fellow bloggers, also from Melbourne, died from following this diet advice. Not only that, but this second blogger persuaded her mother, who also had cancer, to follow the same diet, and she died too. And this is when I realized, wait, this is not just a gimmick. The chemistry is all around you, the ingredients are in everything. This is actually very serious business. And then I looked further into these
companies, Dr. Marcola, the Food Babe, and they'll make big money out of these. So it's very serious business.
And since we're talking about popular Instagrammers, it came to the point that now nutritionists, my colleagues, are popular Instagrammers. And they are the ones feeding and creating these ideas. Here in Spain, I will get in trouble into this, but I don't care. It's the clean eating obsession now. They call it real fooding. The real fooding
right.
movement. And avoiding everything processed or worse, ultra-processed. So he says, and I quote, nutrition has focused on nutrients and calories only instead of food, instead of real food. We speak in terms of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals. When this has nothing to do with health. Health has to do with food, which is much more than the sum of its nutrients and calories. Foods have a complex dietary matrix, which is healthy in its natural and minimally processed form. The degree of processing of these raw materials we have overlooked, ignoring the possible effects that alter the food and have an impact on our health. For all this, the real fooding movement was born for the defense of the weak and oppressed, for the defense of and dissemination of real food, the true food, whatever that means. So for the fight against the obesogenic environment and the ultra-processed epidemic, the objective is to improve the health of population through food. So the proponents of this approach, which is likely to be a variant of the clean eating diet or the paleo diet, which defended this as well, argue that food processing only exists since a couple of centuries ago, and such food processing is the culprit for obesity, for cardiovascular disease, for diabetes, and even for cancer. And this scheme is orchestrated by the industry again, and which represents the dark side here, who wants to kill us all and sell their products. So while I may agree that food processing created foods that are more palatable, more concentrated in energy, which can be eaten faster, I see this as a radical way of putting food, saying that there is food that is not real. Well, maybe it's in the Matrix with Keanu Reeves, I don't know, and leads people into the same pattern of radical food phobia. So, James, please help me out here. I beg you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a topic that really troubles me, even now more that it reached the point that nutritionists, my colleagues, are defending this kind of radical approaches. And what exactly is food processing? Are there food additives that in this amounts that we consume them can be harmful for our health, to the point that increasing risk of obesity rates, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer? What's happening here?
Well, let me start with, if you eat, you have an interest in food, at least to some level. And now with social media, anybody who eats has an interest in food and a platform, and they can use that platform to spread whatever message they want, sometimes about food. Now, the truth is, for most people, most of the time, a balanced diet is the best way to go. And yes, there'll be some cases where you want to do something specific with your metabolism, or something you're doing a very unique physical routine where you need some kind of different nutrition. But that doesn't go down well with most people, right? Most people who need a balanced diet, it's not essentially what they need. When you've got so many voices on social media, people try to stand out, and this is not just in food. It's not even just in chemophobia. It's in every aspect. In politics, anything. And people stand out by polarizing different parts of, the food pyramid. I know you could probably criticize I use the food pyramid as, the balance of food groups in that sense. And what people are effectively doing is to become extreme. They're cutting the food pyramid in different ways, at different angles, and saying this half is bad, this half is good. And they're stretching it out. They're saying this half is not just bad, it is toxic, it is causing cancer, it is placed there by evil corporations to kill you. And the other half is a superfood. It's going to make you live longer. It's going to cure all your ailments. It's going to everything, right? Make you happier, everything. Give you more energy, more endurance. And the more extreme they separate the food pyramid into good and bad, the more they will be heard. We are evolved to listen to the most extreme messages, just as a survival instinct. So that's the way they stand out from the crowd on this platform of social media. So you say, yeah, that's how the radical approaches get there. Anything can be harmful in the wrong amounts. So, I mean, I give talks where I talk about, classic one is I say, say, I flew here on an aeroplane, which is high up in the sky, being bombarded by solar radiation that has been shown to increase the rate of cancer. Yet I was willing to fly halfway around the world, safe, to go and give this keynote presentation in this cancer-causing radiation-fueled capsule. While I was in that capsule in the airplane, I chose to drink wine, which is also, with my meal, which is another cancer-causing chemical. Later on, at the end of the flight, breakfast is served, and I choose to drink coffee, another cancer-causing chemical. Let's say with the meal, with breakfast, there was red meat, there was processed bacon, again, another cancer-causing chemical. These risks are all present, but they're not significant. And that's the key difference, that because, as I said at the very beginning of the podcast, we're evolutionarily evolved to detect the presence of a risk, which we call hazard, but not evolved to understand the magnitude of that risk very well. In fact, we're terrible at judging the magnitude of risks. Just as I told you with that, the 7 factors that cause us to overfear and underfear risks, there is essentially almost no risk that we judge the magnitude of accurately. We're good at saying whether a risk is there or not, but terrible at saying how big it is. So this is where knowledge of dosage is super important. The additives that are put into food are tested extensively by scientists and government regulatory bodies and companies who do a lot of internal testing and research as well. They're shown to be safe in the amounts that they're placed into the foods. And if they're not, if there's any doubt, they get taken out. And in fact, the E-number list of additives, which serve a whole suite of useful roles, were shown to be safe. That's why they were designated an E-number. And over the decades, it's true that some, as scientific knowledge has evolved, it's come clear that maybe some of them are connected to, undesirable outcomes, and they've been removed from the list of E-numbers. They're no longer in use. And companies actually, and the public as well, are incredibly risk averse. If there's any sliver of doubt, it gets taken off the list. Either voluntarily or, when the FDA banned in the US BPA in baby bottles, they even said in the document banning BPA in baby bottles, there was absolutely no safety concern at all. When Subway banned azodicarbonamide in its bread, they said there's no safety concern whatsoever, right? When people don't understand the dosage, they equate the presence of a hazard with the presence of risk, which is incredibly erroneous. And that's the one thing that I would love. If I could magically, everyone understand one concept, it would be dosage. It would be that when something has for example, vitamins. Okay, I like to give the example of vitamins. Vitamins are essential for our health, but if you have 0 of that vitamin, it's going to have some side effects. You're going to be sick. If you have too much of a vitamin, you're also going to be sick. Every vitamin, except possibly vitamin C, if you have too much of it, it will cause toxicity. And this is in fact true of everything. Everything that is good for you, if you have too much of it, it's bad for you. And the same with anything that's bad for you. If you have a tiny amount, it can be neutral or even beneficial. And but this is almost counterintuitive. If you haven't studied dosage, I don't mean you, I mean for people who've never studied dosage, all they learn is the presence of a hazard, and they use their gut instinct to decide any amount of that is bad. And that's where people like the Food Babe, the fitness blogger, gets her catchphrases from. When she says, there is zero, what does she say? There is 0 safe dose of any chemical. It just showed this complete ignorance of dosage, and she's never studied it. It's fine. But unfortunately, she has a platform and millions of followers who then go and take her advice. Yeah. And some of the products that she makes millions of dollars promoting contradict her own advice. That's a serious problem.
Of course,
I can't ask the Food Babe to change. She's too entrenched. But regulators, we need to try and persuade some kind of action there in terms of regulation and education. So yeah, it's a lot about the evolutionary polarity in which we try to slice the food pyramid and say that's evil. That's the greatest thing ever. It's the same way cults brainwash people as well. It's very much of the same mentality.
That is a great phrase. People are great at identifying hazards, but terrible in quantifying them. And that summarizes what the main problem is. In the sports setting, in sports nutrition, antioxidants became really popular. We assume that getting into a massive amount of vitamin C would get the athlete to inhibit the antioxidant, the oxidative processes naturally occurring through exercise. And what we found after this, actually, it was a Portuguese researcher, Victor Hugo Teixeira. He did an amazing research about this, And what we found is that supplementing with mega doses of antioxidants actually inhibits training adaptations. So it's a really good example of how supplementing and getting excess of a vitamin can cause the opposite that we want.
That's right.
And
it's all about the dose.
Yeah, and food is complex. It's emotional. It's memories. It's seasonal, and for different moments as well. And it reached the point that some foods that we consider ultra processed and unhealthy, people label them as not being food, not being real food. So it's Christmas time and I shouldn't eat Christmas treats, or in Easter time, not eating Easter eggs. But I feel this is, maybe a part of an uncultured generation of fitness fanatics that for a long time did not know how to cook anything else besides chicken breast with broccoli and egg whites for breakfast, and never knew how gastronomy and proper cooking works and how cooking evolution made us human and made us who we are. Processing probably made nutrients more bioavailable, and I often present this argument to people and try to reason them. But the example I often pose is that you have a raw carrot, you have a boiled carrot, and you have a boiled carrot with olive oil. From which one would you be able to absorb more beta carotene? And the answer is obviously the boiled carrot with olive oil, but the amount of people that immediately answer the raw carrot, of course, because it's in its natural state, it's enormous. Then
it's incredible.
Yeah, advocates of the church of the ultra-processing food will say, bah, that's an example of good processing. Talk about the bad processing and what really does to us with all the processed flours and meats and hams, with processed meat, with only 50% ham and the rest is maltodextrin and E numbers and preservatives. It's just frustrating. And another argument is that, don't eat foods that your grandparents don't recognize. I mean, okay, so stop drinking whey protein and the functional fit cupcakes and fit pancakes. No, that's right. Different.
Kombucha.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's different. How convenient, huh? No, it's just conflict after conflict of convenient ideas, but they just don't add up.
It's completely illogical. But this is, I would categorize eating disorders, including orthorexia, as a form of chemophobia, because everybody's eating disorder has, or obsession with nutrition has certain, they've cut the food pyramid in half in their specific way. And they've said, I eat nuts, I don't eat fish, I don't eat red meat, I do eat chicken, I don't eat this, I don't eat, and they cut the food pyramid in their own particular way to make themselves unique, I think. It's almost like creating an identity for yourself and giving you something to talk about. And then they find evidence and research, they cherry pick research to justify, why this is particularly bad. And newspaper outlets love it. They can easily feed this kind of audience with equally polarizing headlines. There's the classic Daily Mail list of things that are good and bad for you. I don't know if you've seen the Daily Mail almost on a daily basis is telling you that, chocolate's good for you, wine is bad for you, and then the other way around the following week. But it just resonates with people. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, the sense of belonging. People have this need to belong to somewhere or some cult. And I really want to touch upon this. Are there advantages? Because we just criticize processed food. Are there advantages in processed food that we are too blind to see with our current obsession of fear and processing and chemicals in food? I mean, aren't those, you briefly mentioned them, but I mean, aren't those chemicals in food additives there because they are safe? They're actually safe and they increase food safety. And we don't seem to value food safety, the food safety that we have nowadays. And let's get radical here as well. Since we're all thinking in black and white, let's get radical here and imagine that we would remove all the artificial chemicals and food additives from food, at least the ones that we most fear. What would happen to food as we know it?
If we removed all of the artificial chemicals from food, well, we could do that. There are plantations where they've kept there are plantations where they've kept the original varieties of food from thousands of years ago, before any human intervention at all. and you would walk past these plants as weeds. You wouldn't even notice that they're there. They are so unappetizing, so bitter, so difficult to grow, so small, so hard to open. They're essentially disgusting and so energy poor that we wouldn't even call them food. We would think they're for insects. We wouldn't even see them as edible yet. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors, for whatever reason, decided they were going to eat those things, farm those things, and artificially breed those things so that they would become eventually more delicious. So those foods without any processing, if you like, existed thousands of years ago. And when people say they want real food, clean food, true food, natural food, what they do is they kind of set a point in time at which they're happy to eat, and usually it might be like 1950 or 1900. Or for some people it's paleo, it's way back. They pick a point in history and they say that's the food I want to eat because that's real food. Everything after that is fake. But the truth is they don't actually understand what food has done since that date. So they fear what they don't understand. They fear the roles of these additives in food because they don't know what they're for. I mean, for example, there was the backlash against the American cereal company who was criticized for having synthetic vitamin C as an antioxidant in its cereal. And they were forced to remove the vitamin C from their cereal because it was synthetic in origin, right? And this was, yeah. And they replaced it with something else, which was, less effective and, probably more dangerous than vitamin C, considering vitamin C can be had in almost unlimited amounts. So yeah, people do fear what they don't understand. And do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, when I was really young, they used to sell mobile phone radiation shields.
Yes.
That people used to actually, I remember seeing these in the street. People would buy these like shields to go on the back of their phone. Yeah. So when they're making a phone call, they don't get the radiation going on, not when it's in your pocket. It's like when you put it to your ear. But people used to fear mobile phone radiation. It was shown to be no issue. People used to fear microwaves. There were very old people would fear things like, the fridge, they'd unplug it. Yeah, so and that's because they're not fully understanding what these things are doing. There's actually nothing dangerous about a microwave or a fridge or a mobile phone. It's been extensively tested. And the same thing with food. If you don't understand what these additives are doing, it's easy just to fear them and assume that they're bad. But these are, for example, the emulsifiers that they put into peanut butter. Now, if I bought once an all-natural kind of at a Sunday farmer's market, an all-natural homemade peanut butter with tahini. Anyway, so it was like this sauce, but they didn't add anything. So firstly, it tasted horrible because it needs salt. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was it was in two layers. The top layer was like water, and the bottom layer was like clay. It was like this thick, all the fat had settled to the bottom and become a hard lump. And then the rest of it was liquid on top. Now, it's easy to see how the emulsifier makes that a better product, so I don't have to mix it and then almost break the jar while I'm trying to scoop it out. There are so many roles. Looking at the role of coloring, some people say, oh, well, you don't really need colorants in food, do you? Well, actually, they serve a purpose as well. I sometimes call happiness a vitamin. I call it vitamin H sometimes. And it's something that's neglected. When you break a food down, as you said in the introduction, when you break a food down into its constituent parts, you do lose something, and you lose the identity of the food, the impression, that the memories that it invokes as a whole. And that can be a very happy, pleasant process for people. They enjoy seeing food for what it is sometimes, not always. But happiness is a vitamin, and colors help. They help people enjoy their food more, especially children. I mean, if you have children, you know that when things are brightly colored, they eat like 10 times more. No, which is interesting. There was the study about colorants and ADHD. One hypothesis I have is that the artificial colorants were just very brightly colored. Therefore, the kids ate more, had a higher sugar intake, and therefore were more hyperactive from the sugar, not from color. So this is a hypothesis of mine I'd like to research. But people fear what they don't know.
That's it, basically. This thing of orthorexia is not only a society issue, as we've mentioned, it's a nutritionists as well. And I want just to briefly touch upon this and have your perspective as someone outside of the nutrition realm. It really worries me because it's been affecting dietetic and nutrition students as well. We have recent research showing an alarming situation in the registered dietitians and nutritionists There was a study by Tremeling in 2017 with 636 registered dietitians in the United States, and they applied a validated questionnaire for diagnosing orthorexia, the Ortho 15, also a questionnaire for diagnosing eating disorders. And what they found is, in my opinion, alarming. Almost 50% of the registered dietitians were at risk for orthorexia nervosa, almost 13 were at risk for eating disorders, and 8% were already receiving treatment for an existing eating disorder. Now, I'm less worried about the already diagnosed. They're identified. I'm much more worried because the ones who are at risk of orthorexia think they are fine, and they may actually be reflecting their ideas and dogmas on patients, and in today's era that means spreading them in social media in a much wider range. But I don't believe this is only a thing of the United States. For what I see, orthorexia may actually be pretty much underdiagnosed, and it would be interesting to apply that questionnaire to more nutrition and dietetic colleagues here in Europe as well. That said, James, what is your perspective on this? What other groups may be more vulnerable from developing orthorexic-like behaviors?
Well, the risk actually has been analyzed, and it seems to be most prevalent, and you probably won't be surprised to hear this, in women of around 30 years of age, especially when they're pregnant. There was even another study that showed that women who were in the first trimester, they compared trimesters, they showed that the first trimester of pregnancy was when they're most prone to a notion of contagion, which is the root, it's the first step to becoming chemophobic. When you perceive a danger or something to be dirty or contaminated, that's contagion. So essentially, women of childbearing age, or who are actually bearing children, were the most prone to chemophobia. That and the elderly, of course, they were second. And it makes a lot of sense if you think about it, that evolutionarily we've become most risk averse when we're most at risk. You know, when we need to be careful, we are careful with chemical contamination. So it makes a lot of sense, and it doesn't usually harm us to be too risk averse. To be over avoiding of dangers usually pays off. The risk of not being too careful can sometimes be catastrophic. So that's why we've evolved to be that way. But now that the world we live in is so safe, we can afford to tone that down slightly. And now that stress and anxiety are such major issues, much more than they used to be in ancient times, we now see we'd actually benefit from toning down the fear a little bit.
Yeah, this makes such a good transition to the E-numbers. You know, the E-numbers have to be a popular topic. I've been since forever. In my childhood, it started the first labels with, preservative-free E-numbers, free. I feel that they came back again. So it's something recurrent here. So it's a
fad. Yes.
Yeah. It's a fad that comes and goes. People often put all E-numbers in the same bag and consider them to be all artificial and harmful. And they tend to forget, or maybe they don't know, some E-numbers are actually natural substances or natural occurring substances or really popular, really common substances. Could you please get into more detail on this here? What types of food additives are we talking about? Why are they added to food? Are they safe, or is there any risk in particular in the amounts that we usually consume them?
Well, firstly, the E-numbers. My favorite one is the first one on the list, which is E100. It's actually turmeric, which at the moment is a sort of hipster latte flavor. The turmeric latte is the turmeric everything.
Yes. Functional food.
It's the first E-number, E100. And there are loads of others as well. There's riboflavin. That's actually a vitamin. That's the next E-number. You've then got some colored dyes. You've got an interesting comparison is cochineal, which is natural, but it's the crushed female insects mixed with alum, which produces an aluminium salt that's supposedly natural and supposedly better than the azo dyes which are used. So, I mean, if you're knowledgeable about what the crushed insects thing aside, that's really irrelevant here. The mixing it with alum salts, I mean, they're banned in other substances, yet cochineal is supposedly the better natural alternative to the azo dyes. I mean, it's to be honest, neither here nor there. The dose actually doesn't. The dosage in which they're used are completely safe. They're tested extensively. Beetroot is another one. You've got anthocyanins, which are found in any purple fruit or vegetable. You've got titanium dioxide. There's all sorts of stuff in there. There's all sorts of everything has an E number. Paprika is E160C. A lot of these are simply just natural substances which people would actually eat as a health supplement. some of them, but they don't want to know that they're an E number. But there's not just E numbers. There are plenty of other additives as well, and they all do serve an incredibly useful purpose. So anti-caking agents, for example, they stop your salt becoming all one giant clump. You know, if you sprinkle salt over a pot of boiling water, the steam goes into the salt, it sticks into a lump. So they add these anti-caking agents, which are these perfectly harmless ingredients which keep the salt flowing. You've got antioxidants. You know, when you buy I don't know, the apple slices in McDonald's, or basically anything actually, they add vitamin C now to be as an antioxidant to stop it going bad. The artificial sweeteners, if you want to take in less sugar in energy drinks, those, you know, the Coca-Colas, things like that. They've got humectants to keep food moist. You've got the artificial flavors. You've got the natural and synthetic flavor compounds, which are used to balance seasonal variation in fruit juice. Is a fascinating one. You've got the opposite one, or preservatives. I mean, where would we be without preservatives? Yeah. You know, the fact that, you know, microbial contamination is a huge problem. In organic food, actually, organic food is 7 times more likely to be recalled here in Australia, because those companies tend to be more averse to using these, you know, preservatives and other protection mechanisms. I could go on and on and on and on, right? There are so many additives which are necessary. The azodicarbonamide I mentioned earlier was that ingredient was not only proven to be safe in the dose it was used at half the safe limit by Subway and other chains. It's a bread raising agent. It's like a carbonamide. Mm-hmm. But bakeries such as, you know, Subway and croissants in McDonald's and Starbucks that were using this azodicarbonamide. It's the fact that they used that was the reason that they could advertise freshly baked bread every day. That without that, the bread wouldn't be fresh. So consumers essentially had a trade-off. Do they want the azodicarbonamide used as the leavening agent, which then becomes a gas and disappears from the product, or do they want the product preserved, vacuum packed, and shipped in? It was really a trade-off. That every additive has some kind of positive role, or the companies wouldn't bother to spend the time and the money to add it in.
People tend to forget about this or undervalue the need for this, and how processing in some way made food safer. And we have access to that.
It absolutely did.
People just don't value this. They just see this black and white. It's good for me. It's bad for me, you know. And as nutritionists, people often come to us and ask about a particular food. What do you think about chia? What do you think about line seeds? So what's your opinion on avocado? I should be eating it, right? Especially if I'm on a keto diet. So let's eat avocado every day on every meal. And people just focus on this, isolated stuff that they want to know about, and they don't understand that it's the amount of everything that comprises your diet that it's That's right. Important.
And it's also the experience that as I say, vitamin happiness, there's more to food than the sum of its parts. There's also what you do, the experience of how you enjoy that meal, whether you're with other people, whether you're worried about what's in it, or whether you're just enjoying it. It's a happy experience for you. That will have an effect on your health as well, physical and mental health. Yeah, I say enjoy everything in moderation. It's as simple as that. I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, but for most people, most of the time, just relax and enjoy most of the food pyramid most days, and you'll be fine in moderation. Everything in moderation, and that is generally, for most people, that's the best way to go.
Yeah, and that's that advice. It's labeled as boring. That doesn't sell books.
Yeah.
Balance doesn't sell books. The radical things sell books, and maybe the balance will sell books when we manage to ruin this so much. Then the balance will be the different. Maybe then we will be able to sell books with this message. But I don't know, some foods really get some bad rep. For example, you've gummies and candies and like Haribo bears. And right now, real food advocates will say, how can this guy who calls himself a nutritionist can consider gummies to be real food? Come on. And they're full of E numbers and chemicals and colorants. And anyway, it's just very typical for people to blame gummies, as you mentioned, for children hyperactivity during birthday parties. You see them attacking the candies, and then they transform themselves and they climb walls and stuff, and they become really hyperactive. And my child's hyperactivity is due to this. And you've mentioned briefly colorants, but is there any particular colorant or any particular danger in food colorants that we might be concerned about?
Well, I'm not on top of the current research on colorants, but certainly there have been examples of colorants that have been withdrawn. But my impression is that the colorants tend to be withdrawn before they're proven to be unsafe. So when the moment there's even a sliver of doubt, they become phased out and then eventually banned. They don't wait for the evidence to be concrete, because there are so many. I've got a poster on food colorants, and you can see there are so many red food dyes. There are so many yellows. There are so many of these colors that it's we can get away with having one or two less yellow dyes. We'll be fine. We can still make yellow food. Yeah. So they're very very cautious. The companies themselves will often phase these out, and countries as well will phase them out before the evidence is really conclusive that there might be any side effects. But again, it's all about the amount. These studies are often done in rats where they feed them ridiculous amounts. They'll give them 100 times or 200 times the normal dose, and then measure the effects. And often these rats are genetically engineered to be prone to get sick more, and that way you see the effects. Amplifies any sickness effects, and it's easier to study. So these are not human beings having normal portions. They're rats in cages, highly stressed. Obviously, they're in cages. They're in a lab, being they're genetically modified to be sick more often than normal. Some of them are cancer prone as well, just to study to see if these things cause cancer. They're given mega doses of these colors, and then they might maybe see an effect, then causes the country or the company to phase out that particular compound. It's, when you look at the scientific process that gets these phased out, there's actually nothing to be scared of. It's all about the dosage. You wouldn't eat an entire bag of, say, those gummy bears. That's not what they're designed for. They're designed to be opened and then handed out at a party and shared. They're designed to make a happy experience. They're not designed to make you scared. They're not designed to be the bad guy. They're designed to bring people together. You have a couple each, and that's it. They're designed to be shared. So every food has its purpose, its place in the food pyramid. As much as people criticize the food pyramid, but the whole balance of food groups, each one has its own place, and everything in moderation is by far the best way to go.
Another example of exaggeration is it's sugar. Now, we blame sugar for obesity. We blame sugar for everything, and it's addictive, and you can't stop eating sugar. Pages on the internet that say that sugar activates the same brain areas as cocaine, and we know there's no evidence to prove that. And we can even bring artificial sweeteners here to the party, and it's another gang or faction of artificial things created by the human being, labeled as being harmful and of course bad for us. What can you tell us of whether from the sugar addictiveness or the artificial sweeteners safety in the quantities that we consume them?
Well, sugar probably does activate the same regions of the brain as cocaine, because dopamine release is caused by anything that makes us happy or relaxed. Like sleep increases dopamine, the same as cocaine and sugar. You've got running, meditating, sunshine, and probiotics also have been shown to increase dopamine, like kombucha. So why don't we say that sugar activates the same regions of the brain as kombucha and meditation? That's also true. So there's a big difference between sugar and cocaine. It's easy to make the visual comparison because they're both white. But they're very, very different. When you try to come off of sugar, it's remarkably easy compared to coming off of cocaine. They might have one effect that's the same in the brain, but they are completely different for your neurobiology. They have completely different effects. This is the same technique that some people use when they say, again, back to the Subway. And the croissants ingredient, the bread improver, azodicarbonamide. When people said, it's used in the production of plastic yoga mats, it's also used in the production of croissants, therefore you should not eat it. They make some stupid comparison, which is not relevant at all. And there's a great meme on the internet which shows this as well. It highlights some of the same tactics that fearmongers use, these natural, these kind of fitness extremists, I might call them. It uses the same tactics, logical tactics, to advertise water. And it says things like, it's a great meme. It says things like, if you combust rocket fuel, you create water. Water comes out the back of rockets in the exhaust. It says that 100% of all murderers have admitted to drinking water. And then it says 100% of people who've drunk water have died, or will die. I think it's future tense, right? The 100% of people who drink water will die. And it uses these same logical tactics of, creating completely irrelevant comparisons. So sugar probably does, release dopamine, makes us happy. So does running. So does sunshine. So does kombucha. It's another, fun headline people use to cut the food pyramid in half and say, this is evil, this is good. Yeah. Buy my product.
yeah, that's it. And about the artificial sweeteners, what would you say about them?
They have a place. There are times when you want something to taste pleasant, but you don't want the sugar hit. So they have their place, and again, in the right dose, absolutely fine. These studies are done, as I said before. These studies are done in huge quantities in rats, and you may find an effect there in genetically engineered rats kept in cages under high stress conditions where they're designed to be sick. You feed them 200 to 1,000 times a normal dose. Probably, yeah, they will get sick. But we're not genetically engineered rats. We don't live in cages. We're not highly stressed. We're not, we're not taking 200 times the recommended dose. We're taking 1, and we will have a very different outcome. So it's good to be overly cautious. I understand there is some merit to that, but you've got to take the results of that caution with a pinch of salt, and not worry. I think that's the key message here. Everything in moderation. Just enjoy everything in moderation, and don't worry.
Yeah, and it's that easy to blame sugar for obesity and addictiveness when in reality what's really addictive is food. I mean, how many people do we know that just eat sugar directly with a spoon? They don't eat that sugar directly with the spoon. They eat foods with sugar in them. Are you addicted to sugar, or are you really addicted to foods that, among many other things, have sugar, have fat, have salt, and are crunchy?
Yep.
That's it. It's palatable.
That's right. That's absolutely right. These foods they're multi-billion-dollar companies who spend a lot of research money figuring out what exactly people like to eat. And you're right, it's not sweet is not the answer. It's a whole complex mix of flavors. Otherwise, Coca-Cola wouldn't keep their herbs and spices recipe secret, right? That's what sells. It's not sugar water. People don't drink sugar water. That you can buy sugar water in the supermarket, like in the baking section. Nobody buys it. It's a drink, right? They buy the Coca-Cola because it's got all the other things. It's got the acidity. It's got the who knows what else in there that the secret ingredients, the flavor. People like crunch, they like texture, they like colors, they like fragrances, they like sweetness, they like salt, they like acidity, they like all sorts of things. And it's the balance of the way those come together. We know this. But as you said, people are addicted to food. They're not necessarily addicted to sugar. But at the moment, I think sugar is the enemy. Maybe a few years ago it was trans fats. Yeah. But at the moment it is sugar. A long time ago it was protein. It used to be saturated fats and processed red meat for a while. Now it's back to sugar. Yeah,
and the less ingredients, the better, right?
That's another one. That's incredible. But this is an absolute myth. This is where I get involved with labeling quite a lot, because the way that you label something in science is the number of individual compounds that are in it. So you'd literally label. You couldn't write banana, for example. You'd have to write what exactly is in that particular mixture. You'd have to write the chemicals that are in there. But when it comes to food, there's this weird loophole that in almost every country that I've seen, if something is natural, you can just write the name of that natural product instead of writing the chemical. So for example, if you have like a simple candy bar and you put real banana in there, the banana that you put in there might be 1,000 different natural banana chemicals. But you can just write banana on the ingredients, because there's this loophole that if it's natural, you can just write one word, and that just includes the whole 1,000 of these naturally occurring secondary metabolites, pesticides, and insecticides that are naturally inside the banana. And by the way, if that sounds strange that there are pesticides inside fruits, there are. 99.99% of the pesticides that we ingest daily are natural in origin, and every fruit and vegetable has evolved pesticides, natural pesticides, some of which are allergenic and carcinogenic, to kill predators that try to munch on the leaves or the fruit on the leaves, because plants can't run away. They have to use chemical warfare instead to attack their predators. So there are pesticides naturally present in fruits and in vegetables. Not that has to worry us, but when you add, say, organic banana chips or whatever into a granola, I'm making this up here. You add organic banana into something, you're not omitting all the other additives. They're there. The natural ones are all still there. 99.99% of them, the natural ones, are all still there. You might have no glyphosate, for example, but you've got all the natural pesticides still there. In fact, you've probably got a higher concentration of natural pesticides. There have been some studies that show that when you don't spray crops with so much pesticide on the surface, they produce more within the cells to compensate. So my favorite example was when you get organic essential oils. There was this great study that showed organic essential oils, when they're harvesting them organically, you get many more insects and predators and little rodents and stuff living in the farm, right? Because you don't put pesticides down so much, or they tend to use less in terms of pesticide and herbicide. on organic farms. They still use them, but less. So they'll have more animals in the farm. Then this enormous combine harvester comes along, and when you get your, say, your organic natural lavender extract, it actually contains bits of hedgehog, mouse, spiders, all sorts of other things as well. And my favorite, there was a study that showed, actually it was Spanish. It was paprika. There was a brand of paprika found in Spain that showed to be 20% insects and 80% paprika.
20%. That's protein.
Powder. It's protein, keto.
Yeah.
Keto with superfood. Yes. So the moral is, the message I'm trying to give people here is that something that's natural might have fewer words on the label, but it is by no means simpler in terms of its chemistry. It's just an illusion from the regulations that govern how you have to write ingredients. The truth is that nature evolves compounds and mixtures and structures that are so much more complex than anything we could ever imagine. That nature wins when it comes to complexity of chemistry, of biochemistry, of the rich diversity of natural pesticides, everything, that the nutrients, everything that's in there. Nature wins in terms of 100-fold or more in terms of complexity and mystery. We don't essentially know what all of those compounds are or what they do, but they're there in the natural version. If you have the synthetic version, it's actually purer, very heavily tested, stable, non-seasonal, like it's stable throughout the months of the way it's produced. The natural one is actually much more variable and much longer in terms of its ingredients. Just to contradict their, long ingredients labels.
Yeah, and if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it, right?
No, learn how to say it. It's unfortunate. Chemists like long names. It's just sometimes I wish that physicists worked on our team, because, physicists, they name stuff so simply, black hole. They look at it and whatever, it's like a child naming stuff, white dwarf, red dwarf, it's just, they say what it is, Milky Way, because it looked like spilt milk. They're so simple, the names they use in physics. But unfortunately, in chemistry, they take Latin roots and splice them together, and it becomes a whole alphabet soup. But that's just what chemists are into. Sorry.
Yeah, completely. And we could also bring here the whole GMO topic, which could make this episode last for 5 hours. But it's another perfect example of irrational fear. And people tend to forget that some products that we have available today have gone through centuries of modifications and recent modifications. And I don't think there's a better example than the banana, for example. It's a sterile, seedless, yellow mutant, and we eat it on a regular basis.
Our favorite fruit, but it's nothing natural about it.
Yeah,
there's nothing natural about anything we eat. If you go into the supermarket today, you go to the most natural, organic, handmade, locally grown, fair trade, free trade, paleo, keto section, whatever you want, you can find. At them all, halal, kosher, whatever, the most, all these ethical labels. You go to that section of the supermarket, gluten-free, everything, you'll find nothing natural there. And the reason is because humans have been playing and tweaking food for thousands of years. Probably the most tweaked food is the watermelon. It bears no resemblance whatsoever. In fact, probably leading some of the world's research now is Israel. They've got some amazing new varieties coming out of, it's incredible what they've been developing. They've got a new seedless pepper, which you can actually eat as a snack. It's really sweet and really flavorful. You can buy them like a bag of chips, fresh peppers, and just eat them. Roma tomatoes, those kind of those slightly elongated tomatoes, Roma ones, they were developed in 1950. The miniature watermelons, they're really small. And they're brand new. Pink Lady, one of my favorite apples, was actually made in 1973 here in Australia. It's very new. Even lemons were about 2,500 years old. Tofu from 4,000 years ago in ancient China. That we've been playing with food and evolving food literally for thousands of years, ever since we started farming. And bananas are just one example. Carrots used to be white, for example.
Yeah. Sure.
People liked the new color, and that stuck. And now you can get purple carrots, you can get black carrots. They taste the same, by the way. But if you ever tempted, you can get red bananas as well. They also taste the same. But we're constantly evolving food, and for me, it's exciting. I'd love to go to one of these, genetic food fairs where new varieties are coming out. I think it's incredibly exciting that we are battling, decreasing biodiversity, but by creating new diversity in the things that we eat. I think it's really a beautiful thing, actually.
Yeah. There's actually any danger in consuming the GMO foods?
We've been doing it for thousands of years, and everyone's fine. So no. people often say, "Oh no, well that's not GMO. That was crossbreeding. That was what I call it, propagation. That was some of the, you know, where they connect the roots and the shoots together. That one, grafting. You know, they say, oh, that was okay, because what they mean is that was okay because they understand it. And once you study the techniques that are used in genetic engineering and you understand that, you realize that's okay too. So again, some people put a point in history and they say everything before this was okay. Everything before fertilizers was okay. Or they say everything before transgenics was okay. Yeah. Everything before sterile breeds was okay. Everything before agriculture was okay for paleo people. They put a point on the timeline, but the truth is that they haven't actually studied and learned what happened after that point, and they should. I find keeping up to date with this stuff fascinating, and I think it's actually thrilling to see. I would love to see, and I hope this happens in my lifetime, a domesticated acorn. For some reason, I think that's, you know, animals love acorns, but we think they're disgusting, they're inedible. Imagine if you had a domesticated acorn. It would be the size of a melon, and it would be like a giant chestnut, but more flavorful. It'd be beautiful. I'd love to see that.
That would be nice to see. That would be curious. Yeah, but you know, you've mentioned something that vegetables and fruits, and they don't have a way to defend themselves, so they have these natural pesticides that they secrete in some way, they produce. You know, and vegetables want to kill you. People tend to forget that they don't want to be eaten, so there are some vegetables that may be dangerous for humans. Could you please give us examples of, you know, we have things like bitter almonds, that if you eat bitter almonds in excess, and you have cyanide that may be fatal, I don't know. Could you please provide us with some more examples to put things here in perspective for listeners?
Absolutely, yeah. Limonene, that's a nice one. Allergenic, limonene causes cancer in male rats, but not in female rats, and it's found in lemon and in black pepper in quite large amounts. You've got the active ingredient in basil, again, it's toxic. You've got the active ingredient in it's called sesamol, it comes from sesame seeds, again toxic. Benzyl acetate in green tea and white tea, again toxic. These are all natural pesticides. You've got safrole, which is actually a possible human carcinogen that's present in nutmeg. It's one of the active ingredients that can kill you, actually, in relatively small amounts. Alpha toxins in peanuts cause liver cancer. Plenty of stuff in mushrooms. They're fascinating in terms of the biochemistry. Lots of them are carcinogenic as well, in tiny amounts. The point is that anything in an extreme amount will cause some kind of damage to the body. So, when they say that, when they find something that causes cancer, that when you do the experiment, the test, it's called the Ames test, to see whether something causes cancer or not. Half of the things that you test, no matter what they are, will come out as a yes. And I won't go into the whole process of the test, but there's a process you do to these cells. And if it comes out positive, you can say it might cause cancer in humans, but 50% of anything in the universe comes out as positive. So, they found, of all of the natural flavor chemicals in apple juice, they found that 60% of the ones that they tested caused cancer. About a third of the ones they found in mushrooms caused cancer. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere, and to try and avoid them would be impossible and incredibly stressful. So don't. Just enjoy everything in moderation. Understand dosage. When you have something in a normal, reasonable, moderate dose, it's not going to do you any harm. It's been proven for over thousands of years. Medicine is at a more advanced state than it's ever been, and I wish people would appreciate that and just relax. Don't fall for the hype. These nutrition and fitness cults, as not everybody needs an extreme diet that has to change every couple of months. Just enjoy and use food as a happy social process that fuels you to do the things you love. It's as simple as that. There is no good and bad in the food pyramid. It's just use it to fulfill your life.
Okay, and since we're talking about vegetables, and we could include fruits here and all crops, it would be almost criminal not to touch upon pesticides and organic farming. Are there any dangers in conventional farming that justify us to pay, triple the price or double the price for an organic product?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, this probably comes as no surprise that the organic farming thing is it's a price premium slapped on, fruits and vegetables that are farmed a certain way. Yet there's no nutritional difference in the end product. There's actually no gain from a nutritionist perspective for the consumer. They're really paying for an element of luxury, if you like. They're paying to be seen to eat organic food. They're buying into an elitist club, if you like. And it is elitist. It's not the future of farming at all, because it's absolutely unsustainable organic farming requires more land, more resources because you have such lower yields with organic farms that actually if we converted much of our current agricultural land over to organic farming, food prices would rocket. Of conventional food would rocket and this would impact on the poorest communities on the planet because you'd essentially be reducing the food output of the world. It seems actually quite unethical. In small amounts, it can be a harmless luxury for a small proportion of rich markets who can afford to buy it. But when people push organic farming as necessary as a solution to poverty, climate change, disease, blah blah blah, it's not. It's an unsustainable luxury. That's all it is, and there is no nutritional benefit whatsoever from eating that food. I mean, some people, there'll always be studies, that show, but there was a major meta-analysis of over 3,000 of these studies, and what they found was overall there was no nutritional difference. Now that's not to say that each of the studies said there was no difference, because actually overall, while there was no difference overall, some of the studies claimed yes, for example, organic cauliflower contained more omega-3 than conventionally grown cauliflower, and there were differences. There was a couple where the conventionally farmed crop had a higher level of a certain vitamin or nutrient than the organic crop. But these are just statistical noise. They averaged out overall to be essentially meaningless. You will always get some statistical noise from these. Yeah. And besides, the cauliflower one really sticks in my mind because who eats cauliflower for the omega-3?
Yeah.
Right? It makes no sense. It's like gluten-free fish. It makes no sense. So while that was a fact, I'm not disputing that cauliflower that was organic had more omega-3. I mean, it's one sliver of salmon is going to eclipse the amount of omega-3 in a cauliflower. So there's no benefit really, and it's a luxury. It's an unsustainable luxury, and like many other luxury markets, they're not doing harm. But when you start to push these products, these organic things onto people who can't afford them, or into markets where they really don't have the resources to be wasting land and water on organic crops, that's when it actually does harm. And that's where I step in. That's where I stop. That's where I actually campaign. That's where I speak out. I've got I even eat organic food here in Australia. We're in a country where we're lucky enough to have amazing agricultural output. We produce, we have amazing agricultural produce here, and some of the food that we buy in the supermarket is organic. I enjoy eating organic food. I buy it if it's cheaper, but there is no nutritional benefit whatsoever.
Yeah, about cauliflower, criticizing cauliflower for the paleo dieters is almost a crime because it's one of the base of their diets. You will be amazed with the amount of cauliflower crust-based pizzas. They still wanted to make pizza now because our paleo ancestors may actually eat pizza. I don't know. So they replaced the flour with cauliflower crust. They grated the.
But you're telling me that the paleo people love cauliflower? That seems a little odd to me. I might be wrong here, but I thought the paleo diet was supposed to be inspired by only eating the foods, or mostly eating the foods that Paleolithic people would have eaten, and cauliflowers have been around only for a few centuries.
Exactly.
They're extreme genetic mutants. I mean, no wild vegetable would ever grow to look like that. Like, there's no reason for it to look like that. Right? It doesn't serve any purpose for the plant.
Oh, you're ruining everything.
We found that mutant and we thought, delicious vegetable. It's just producing large amounts. They don't grow wild, right? You don't see cauliflowers just growing in the wild like that. They'd be eaten in no time because they're too delicious. So I find it a little odd. I mean, maybe the paleo movement is actually, maybe you could come back and say, a paleo person could say, actually, we're not aiming to eat the exact foods that the Paleolithic people ate, but we're aiming to eat the same balance of nutrients that the Paleolithic people ate. I mean, you could come back with that argument. There's a little more merit to that.
Yeah, but the paleo diet was about that as well. It was they didn't know what vegetables were mutated or came afterwards, but they went on eating them and believing that those products were available by that time. It's still around. It had its peak, I believe, around the year 2010. It was the peak of the paleo diet. Now it originated other stuff like the functional diet, the keto. I believe it's a ramification of the paleo diet as well. and things just come and go, as we've been saying here on the podcast. And social media has been contributing a lot to this. This issue affects everyone. We see general population looking for advice in social media. We see these auto-entitled nutrition coaches on internet who provide advice based on nothing, and people believe in them. And we see athletes, in this case, cyclists, taking advice from social media, talking to each other about stuff they read on social media. It comes back to the problem that we always talk about. Everyone has a platform these days. And my question here is there a way in which social media can actually be used to pass on accurate, balanced messages, or there's no such way that we can make that through social media? And I really want listeners to think about this question as if they were here on the podcast being interviewed. Are we ready to deal with information? Now, should we keep on exposing science through social media, or should we filter it and make it only available to people that know how to interpret it and deal with it?
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, to try and step in and control the flow of information it's actually an impossible task and would be very unwelcome from almost everyone for different reasons. So I think as an educator who tries to promote science literacy in young people, from my perspective, that's the solution. The solution is to make people literate enough in science to be able to discern what is good information from bad information. And there's a very easy trick, actually, to do this. When you see something on social media, look at it firstly skeptically, but look at the source. So open it, look at the original source of this information. If there's no source, you can disregard it. But if there's a link to some kind of source, open that up and see, is it from your local health authority? If so, it's probably the most reputable sort of health information you can find. And when I say from your local health authority, I mean, here in Australia, every state has its own health advice board. And we call it here, it's betterhealth.vic. In Canada, I think it's called health.ca, but they've each got these own. There's the nhs.uk in Britain. These are reputable. There's WebMD in the US, and there are others as well. But these are reputable sources of health-related information. And second would probably be university studies and articles, but they're more likely to be backup sources or the latest research. The primary source that you've got to go for, it doesn't matter how it's distributed. Whether it's through some social media or otherwise, if it's coming from your local health authority, from your national health authority, from some kind of medical group, you can be pretty sure that it's reasonable. And the other thing is, shop around. So when you see some advice, I often look at multiple sites. I look at WebMD, I look at nhs.uk, I look at betterhealth.vic, and it's surprising that actually you find the same advice almost word for word on those three sites for most things. It's almost exactly the same. It's almost like they've collaborated or they've all read the same research and made the same conclusion. Now, if you find something that absolutely bucks that trend, it's probably not going to be reputable. So it all comes down to one thing. Enjoy everything in moderation and trust your doctor, and distrust anybody who tells you otherwise. That you just got to trust your doctor, trust your local health authority. And yes, I encourage them to spread messages through social media. That's how people actually do, unfortunately, most of their reading now. It's Twitter, it's Facebook feeds, it's Instagram. And yes, they do get active on there. They spread information out on there. Important health messages do have a huge reach through those channels. So, but yes, do read what's on there. Trust it if it's come from your health authority or from your doctor, not from anywhere else, basically.
Yeah, one of the problems that happens here is that the word "a study" has been abused. And you see, a study has just seen that, I don't know, the most ridiculous stuff. You have the travel gene. You may have the travel gene. You may have the, when it's actually a study, people don't actually believe in them. And people are often fond of saying on the internet now that, I'm tired of these studies. These studies say nothing. These studies, but in reality, they are not studies. How can people distinguish between them?
Well, unfortunately, you've really got to read them. I mean, there are some debunking sites online, but I think by the time science by its nature is exploratory. So people, a group of scientists, very reputable scientists, may do a perfectly designed study that comes out with one conclusion. Now, scientists on the other side of the world may come up with a completely different conclusion. And this is normal in science, that we advance the frontier in different ways. And then at the frontier of science, they're always debating. They go to conferences and they have, very vigorous debates on what the conclusion should be from the conflicting data, from the frontier of science is up for debate, the top 1%. But the 99% that is settled is nobody debates that. And that's the stuff that gets put onto government websites, so especially when it comes to health information. So I would say as a general sort of member of the public, or even somebody who's really into nutrition, you don't have to pick up the latest research. It might be interesting to read, but you don't have to act on it. And that's what I do. I keep, I read New Scientist. I get, I'm interested in the latest scientific research, but I don't act on it. I look at it, I'm interested, I might, tell the story on, but I can't change my lifestyle based on that, because I know that soon there'll be a conflicting study coming out, and the scientists will take a few years to figure out what the real conclusion is. There was a great example of this was recently. There was a headline I saw that said LED lighting is increasing the rates of breast cancer in women, and I thought, I was skeptical, right? I read the original study, and it turns out that people who have LED lighting are more likely to work throughout the night, because it keeps you awake slightly better than incandescent lighting. And it's not the LED lighting, it's the nighttime, the disrupted circadian rhythm that has an increase in cancer rates. And that's been known for a long time. People who work night shifts have cancer rates that are higher than those who don't, when you disrupt your body clock. So the study was completely misleading. So the article was completely misleading, and the headline even more so. The headline said the light bulbs caused the cancer, which is absolutely not true. It's the working throughout the night. So yeah, things like that. If you saw that headline, you might think, oh no, going to change all my bulbs back. The best thing to do is read it. It's interesting. It's an interesting topic for discussion, but don't act on it. The scientists don't act on it. They'll look at it, wait for more evidence, and the conclusion of the original paper will say it appears to be this. However, more research is needed. Wait for that science to become settled and to appear on a government-sponsored website, on your local health authority's website. That's when you can act.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And I mean, we can't blame people for wanting to know more, but it appears to me that we have an excess amount of information and convenient misinterpretations sometimes. Perhaps we who are performing science also have the responsibility to try and make our message more understandable. And maybe we haven't been doing that in the past years, such as the initiative that you have, James, or with your YouTube channel, the Sincerely Chemicals, and your books. Would you agree that we have that moral responsibility as well?
I think we do. I mean, anyone who communicates with the public has some, and has an influence over public opinion needs to be, but of their own account, needs to have some sort of moral code for doing so. But it's really something you sign into and subscribe to yourself. Clearly we live in a world where you can get away with saying a lot that's not backed up at all, and you can be the head of state of a very powerful nation doing that. So that's not going to change anytime soon. We can just decide as individuals that we want to do the right thing, and I think a lot of people are doing the right thing.
We must have some faith on humanity, otherwise we are lost. And our message here is, of course, to try and figure out solutions, not also identifying the problem. And the problem, I think it's already there. It's identified. People already know that influencers don't provide good health advice, but we need solutions, and we have to face these kind of things with optimism. And we are all working for Monsanto and Big Pharma, right, James?
Well, yeah, of course we are, especially now Monsanto doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. It's funny. There's this, again, it's the conspiracy mindset that once you subscribe to something that's a belief that's incredibly unscientific, like, vaccinations cause autism, or as I like to say, vacations cause autumn. It's something I like to, but once you've subscribed to something incredibly unscientific, you have to use unfounded conspiracy tactics to bat away anybody else who tries to challenge you. And that's the classic, the classic one. You work for Monsanto, you work for Big Pharma, you work for blah, blah, blah. And what can you say? You can't ever prove that you don't work for Monsanto. So what can you do? It's you just
let's leave the mystery out there. No, it's just irony, of course, and it's an argument that is often presented there. That if you are not in their mindset or defending the things that they are, you are, of course, working to pharmaceutical companies or to the industry, who is the bad guy here. Right. And it's just trying to sell us products. And pharmacy companies, they don't want you to know about the treatments of cancer. They already have it for years. I don't know.
If they had it, they would be selling it. They would be using it.
Yeah.
They would be making loads of money from it. It's exactly the same kind of conspiracy mindset that traps people into fearing the benign everyday substances and food groups that they have every day.
It comes back to the same over and over again. And just to wrap things here, and I just wanted to clarify something to the listeners in case they are getting the wrong ideas of what we're trying to communicate here. We are not advocating that you should only eat processed food all the time. Our message here is that yes, you should try to have a healthy routine, trying to apply, the things we've been learning here from researchers that I bring to the podcast. But accept the fact that sometimes it's okay to indulge and enjoy some foods, enjoy life, enjoy sometimes food that is more sugary, more processed in some ways as part of our lives. In a party, in a holiday season, and then life goes on, and it's all about context. In the context of cycling, I make sure to go back to cycling because we have been talking about everything but cycling. And if we're trying to apply this to the reality of this specific sport, these athletes need to consume a right diet, of course. They need carb sources that will vary, but I'll have to make sure that the quantities are met for each training session or race. I'll provide with enough protein, to support training adaptations, muscle repair, recovery, and all those sort of things that we've been talking about. And I absolutely need sometimes some processed foods, such as energy bars, energy gels, energy drinks, because they are convenient. And we forget about this convenience factor that's so important. Occasionally, after races, sugary food like ice creams, like Haribo gummy bears, rice pudding, can also be convenient and palatable, and for a cyclist who may not feel hungry by the end of the race, it's essential. And it's curious how, in some way, if I refer to a typical, a recovery drink, which is nothing more than maltodextrin, dextrose or some type of protein powder, it will not get such a bad rap because it's a sports food. But drinking a can of Coke right after a race will get all sorts of bad comments. Please don't take this podcast, I beg the listeners, to support what is the next big fad trend that's already there, and it's already identified, by the way. It's called intuitive eating. Just for the hashtag intuitive eating. If you search for the hashtag
intuitive eating.
Yes, intuitive eating on Instagram, you'll see what I'm talking about. And this is not intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is, it follows the same line of dangerous wellness trends, such as clean eating. And in my opinion, it's just another name for cheat meals. That's it. Yeah. And this will lead nowhere. No, people just need to stop labeling things and labeling the things they do so they can stick with that routine. This is not intuitive eating. It doesn't have to have a name all the time. These are goals that are set by influencers so people can create a new set of goals that they can fail at. And it's a never-ending cycle. So, James, my final question for you would be, if you had a giant speaker right now that could allow for everyone on the planet to hear you for 30 seconds, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that the world is getting better and better every day. And that's due to human activity. Humans are making the world a better place, despite the fearful news that's spread by the media. Disease is down, lifespans are up, poverty is plummeting worldwide, nutrition is improving, medicine is advancing, science and technology are producing, gadgets and things that are making our lives in just so much more convenient in ways we can never imagine a few decades ago. There will always be small exceptions to this trend. There'll always be the occasional famine or earthquake or a new war or crime and disease, but all of these things are actually going down overall. There are downward trends in all of those things. These are just tiny blips in what is, an overwhelmingly positive trend of human development, that we are improving the existence of our fellow human beings overwhelmingly quickly. And it's easy to forget that. It's easy to buy into the narrative that we're actually making things more toxic and more harmful, that food is somehow becoming less nutritious, which it's not, that we're reducing the numbers of varieties of foods out there, which is also not true.
the illnesses are rising. Most of them are not. No, it's important to recognize that we're making the world a better place, a safer place, a happier place. Ignore the clickbait. Real world clickbait included on television, in newspapers, those quick fixes to non-existent fears, non-existent problems. If you can only take one message from this podcast, it will be this. It will be ignore the clickbait. Enjoy everything in moderation. And that's the secret to living healthily.
That sounds amazing, an amazing message to leave our listeners with. So, James, I understand you have published many books so far on these topics. Can you tell us a little bit about them, their titles, and if people are interested in acquiring them?
Sure, they're all listed on my website. Most of the books are free. Most of them are books. The books are short and free. They're on my website. There's The Naturalness Fallacy is the latest short book I've done. Then the biggest book is Fighting Chemophobia, which is on Amazon.
Nice. And then you have a really cool YouTube channel. I've memorized the jingle as well. Which I love, and I absolutely recommend everyone visiting it. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, the YouTube channel is core messages that I believe need to be spread. In terms of some of them are things like stories about fitness bloggers and why you shouldn't take their advice all the time. You should be skeptical, only trust the doctors and government-sponsored, health agencies. There's another video on why we need preservatives in our products. There's another video on why we need fragrances in our products. There's sort of a focus on food and on personal care products and the chemicals that are in them. And it's just a mixture of messages, one episode per message with, and they're the key messages that I think people need to reduce the fear of chemicals, basically.
Okay, perfect. I will leave the links for the YouTube channel and your page on the show notes. And if people want to keep up with your updates, James, your amazing infographics, videos, and anything you share, where can people find you?
They can find me on, you can actually go to my website. I've got the URL, chemistry.fish.
Okay,
and that will get you to, chemistry.fish, easy to remember. That will get you to my website, to everything else, and the books, and the t-shirts, and the posters.
I like the hat. It says "Make chemistry great again."
That's right. Yeah, I have a clothing line. Yeah, that's a surprisingly popular one.
Yes, that's a funny one because we have a group of nutrition colleagues in Portugal, and we have this hashtag among ourselves and "Make nutrition great again." So Donald Trump is making a huge influence on everyone who wants to be great again. So, James, I don't even know what to say. This has been incredible. I've enjoyed so much talking to you, and we need more people like you with balanced messages and, the capacity to communicate chemistry in a fun, accessible way, especially here where I think we might have been providing a public service. So thank you so much for your time.
It's an absolute honor to be on the podcast.
Congratulations into making it this far. This was indeed much larger than usual, but James is an incredible guy and an excellent communicator, and time goes by faster when you are enjoying what you are doing. I truly hope James was able to clarify a lot of confusion that may be out there regarding this topic. For more info, please check out the show notes on fuelthepedal.com, where I'll be putting all the links to check out James' work. Thank you so much for listening in. We have some amazing guests coming up, and rest assured, we will be coming back to talk about cycling-related nutrition. I hope to have you guys here for the next episodes. Hasta luego.